The Honorable, the Speaker.
We welcome you to the 12th National Youth Parliament that takes place on Monday, October 27th, 2014.
Forged from the love of liberty in the fires of hope and prayer, with boundless faith in our destiny, we solemnly declare, side by side we stand, islands of the blue Caribbean Sea. This our native land. We pledge our lives to thee. Here every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation. Here every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation. Almighty God, creator of this universe and all that is in it, we graciously thank you for numerous blessings bestowed upon us. As we gather here today as future leaders of this great land, we look towards you for guidance and wisdom in our deliberations during this sitting of the National Youth Parliament. We ask for wisdom in governance, strength for all our leaders, guidance in our schools, and healing of wounds of separation and division. Open our hearts to accept the truth and demonstrate love always, so that we and all citizens of this nation can live in harmony. Amen.
Announcements by the Speaker.
Papers. Honorable members, leave of absence has been granted to the member of Superior who is ill.
Papers.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper. The report of the 11th National Youth Parliamentary Debate 2013.
Questions to ministers. Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers. Personal explanations. Introduction of bills. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister or parliamentary secretary.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, as required by Standing Order 33, I seek the leave of the House to consider private business instead of government business.
Honorable members, the question is that the House consider private business instead of government business. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Public business. Private business. Motions.
Leader of the Opposition. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas in 1991, Trinidad and Tobago ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and whereas Article 19 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child states that parties shall take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse, while in the care of parents, legal guardians, or any other person who has the care of the child. And whereas it is the responsibility of the government to establish the appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational structures to protect our nation's children from persons who would do them harm. And whereas it has been proven by several studies that many youths who commit violent acts are themselves the victims of violence, abuse, neglect, or maltreatment. And whereas corporal punishment can also be considered a form of violence. Be it resolved that this Parliament declared the continued use of corporal punishment in schools in Trinidad and Tobago a violation of Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And be it further resolved that the government indicate clearly its policy positions in relation to alternative methods of dealing with indiscipline and delinquency and for protecting this nation's children. Madam Speaker, the reason I bring this motion before the Honorable House is because I consider our nation's children our nation's future. And, Madam Speaker, the opposition believes our nation's future must be protected from the hands of those who have adopted an attitude of quick fixes. Madam Speaker, in so doing, they have neglected the responsibility of securing our nation's future. In essence, we believe that enough is not being done to protect our nation's children. I wish to bring to attention that the government of Trinidad and Tobago ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1991. And for the benefit of the government, to ratify means to sign and give formal consent to. The government signed and consented to, according to Article 19, and I quote, take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational structures to protect our nation's children from persons who would do them harm. Madam Speaker, 23 years later, the government is still unclear and indecisive on its policy's position in regards to alternate methods that specifically deal with indiscipline and delinquency in our nation's schools. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, they wish to advocate for the continued use of corporal punishment. Is this a government of contradiction? You see, Madam Speaker, it is actions like these which make our country look like a Mickey Mouse country. Madam Speaker, we are yet to see the implementation of consented, effective policies that are in line with this convention. For the benefit of the House, I summarize the definition of corporal punishment as outlined by the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. Corporal or physical punishment is any punishment in which physical force is used and intended to cause some degree of pain or discomfort, however light. When the government of Trinidad and Tobago ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, it was a binding obligation to respect the human rights of all within our jurisdiction, including our nation's children. Madam Speaker, the opposition will demonstrate in the House today why this Parliament should declare the continued use of corporal punishment in schools in Trinidad and Tobago a violation of our children's rights. Madam Speaker, children are not mini-human beings with mini-human rights. Children have the same rights as adults to have respect for their human dignity and physical integrity. In a United Nations report, it was noted that while the Children Act 2012 was assented to in August 2012, it is still awaiting proclamation. It was also noted that though Article 4 of said Act punishes cruelty to children, there is a caveat in subsection 6. I quote, "Nothing in this section shall be construed as affecting the right of any parent, teacher, or other persons having the lawful control or charge of a child to administer reasonable punishment to such child." Madam Speaker, I would like to know if government can explain to the House what reasonable punishment is. Children's human rights under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child require repeal of such defenses and the amendment of legislation that ensures children's equal legal protection from assault. My esteemed colleagues in the opposition will demonstrate further how corporal punishment can cause serious physical and psychological harm to our children, how it teaches children that violence is an acceptable and appropriate strategy for resolving conflict or to get people to do what they want, and lastly, how it is just ineffective as a measure of discipline. I beg to move. In accordance with Standing Order 41.5, the motion requires a seconder.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion and I reserve the right to speak.
Honorable members, I will now propose the question for debate. The question is, whereas in 1991, Trinidad and Tobago ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and whereas Article 19 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child states that parties shall take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment, or exploitation, including sexual abuse, while in the care of the parents, legal guardians, or any other person who has the care of the child. And whereas it is the responsibility of the government to establish the appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational structures to protect our nation's children from persons who would do them harm. And whereas it has been proven by several studies that many youths who commit violent acts are themselves the victims of violence, abuse, neglect, or maltreatment. And whereas corporal punishment can also be considered a form of violence, be it resolved that this Parliament declare the continued use of corporal punishment in schools in Trinidad and Tobago a violation of Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and be it further resolved that the government indicate clearly its policy positions in relation to alternative methods of dealing with indiscipline and delinquency and for protecting this nation's children. Honorable Member for Point Fortin.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of this esteemed House, now before I continue with my presentation, I would like to define some of the terms used in this motion proposed by the opposition. Firstly, the term corporal punishment, and I would like to quote from the UN Committee on the Rights of a Child, which my honorable leader of the opposition has defined. Corporal punishment is considered any physical force which is used and intended to cause some degree of pain or discomfort, however light. Now, corporal punishment is used as a corrective measure to indiscipline and delinquency. This is contrary to violence, and I would like to quote from the UN Committee also on the Rights of a Child, which states that violence is the use of physical force where behavior is aggressive and the perpetrator uses his or her own body as an object to inflict long-term injury, and I quote, long-term injury and discomfort upon an individual. Hence, unquote. Hence, corporal punishment cannot be deemed a form of violence because it does not inflict long-term physical injury upon an individual. This physical long-term injury comes about where there is a breach to the corporal punishment method, and this goes into a different issue, which is abuse. Now, abuse, according to the CDC, is the physical, sexual, or emotional maltreatment or neglect of a child or children. I would just like to shed some light, Madam Speaker, on two recent videos that went viral. One showing abuse and one correction. The first video was correction. This featured a mother whipping her child with a belt for posting inappropriate pictures on the net. Now, this is corporal punishment to its best effect, because even the child admitted that it was out of her mother's own love and care that she scolded her. The other video featured a mother using a shovel. Now, Madam Speaker, I know a shovel is used to pick up sand and dog mess. I don't know what children is sand and dog mess. These two terms should not be used synergetically. Now, Madam Speaker, the motion states that we as the government are supposed to propose alternative measures of dealing with indiscipline and delinquency within our schools. And we as the government have implemented alternative measures. Some of these measures include overcorrection, timeout, lines, detention, and even parental cooperation. These alternatives is also known as restorative measures, and they look at repairing the harm caused by delinquent behavior or indiscipline. It is best accomplished through cooperative processes that include all stakeholders. Now, I'd like to give an example of one of the alternative measures that we have implemented already. I would like to use overcorrection. Now, overcorrection requires the pupils to exaggerate forms of the opposite behavior to the misbehavior displayed. For example, for environmental degradation, also known as littering, if a child is accused of littering, he is required to clean the entire classroom. Another example, if a child is found running in the corridor, he is required to pace the corridor quietly for a few times. Now, once monitored properly, overcorrection is an effective alternative punishment. But as I mentioned earlier, Madam Speaker, these methods seem to not be working. Hence, I say, bring back the whip in our schools. Now, I know for a fact that the other side would like to accuse this government of being barbaric and advocating sanctioned bullying. But I'm here today to tell you, Madam Speaker, that they are the ones that are advocating sanctioned bullying and barbaric behavior, because they are telling children that they can do whatever they want and get away with it. Now, Madam Speaker, this let it slide and sweep everything under the carpet attitude needs to be stopped if we are to deal with the delinquency and the indiscipline within our schools in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam
Honourable
Speaker.
Member, could you please take your seats? Your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to extend my speaking time by 3 minutes in order to complete my contribution.
Honourable members, the question is that the speaking time for the member for Point Fortin be extended by 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no. I think the ayes have it. Member, you may resume.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This same attitude is what has our parents crying in front of the magistrates and the police officers and the prisons, begging for their sons and daughters. Madam Speaker, the opposite side seems to not understand this motion, because I would like to quote from the UN Committee on the Rights of a Child, the Convention. It clearly states, and I quote, "In terms of discipline, the Convention does not specify what forms of punishments should be used. However, violence is not accepted." Now, we have previously distinguished corporal punishment from being violence. So the motion is clearly contradicting itself. So, Madam Speaker, how are we supposed to deal with indiscipline and pupils who disturb other children who want to learn? Because if we talk to them too hard, it's verbal abuse. If we punish them physically, it's physical abuse. And worse yet, if we put them out in the sun, it's solar abuse. So what are we to do now, Madam Speaker? Should we rather let prison officers deal with our children, or let the teachers deal with our children? In closing, I would like to say that the reintroduction of corporal punishment should be seen as a corrective measure rather than violence. And this government stands firmly by for the reintroduction of corporal punishment within our schools. I say, give back the teachers our whip. Give them back. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Speaker for Princestown.
Thank you,
Sorry. The Honourable Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, I would just like to touch on a few things the Honourable Member for Point 14 stated. First of all, if it constitutes the solar abuse, I suggest that we give our children vitamin D and an umbrella to deal with that matter. And the Honourable Member also stated that long-term injury does not constitute to corporal punishment. But I would like to point out an article done by Ada Mora, she's a renowned psychologist, I don't know who we should trust, him or her, entitled "The Influence of Corporal Punishment on Crime." She basically states, and I quote, "Adrenaline output increases sharply due to fear, anger, and physical punishment. The victim becomes easily angered and prone to poor impulse control and spontaneous violent outbursts." Now, that is the behavior of the criminals in our country's prisons, not the behavior of the students in our educational facilities who are the future for this nation. And the Honourable Member for Miaro will further elaborate on that matter. I would just like to thank the future Prime Minister of this honourable nation, and the remark made by the Honourable Member for Point 14 about the other side. We will be on the other side come next election. Corporal punishment is a direct violation of the rights of a child. Because basically the rights of a child says that neglect, maltreatment, and exploitation are all prohibited against our country's youth. I would like to point out that it is ironic that this government comes into this august house and proclaims themselves to be the self-proclamation for the defense of the rights of our children, but yet they don't want to implement this legislation within our legislature. I would like to also point out that in an article done by The Guardian, I'll be very brief on it, entitled "No Law Against Corporal Punishment," done on the 27th of April 2014, it says that there is no law in TNT protecting children from corporal punishment at home or at school. A former Attorney General, Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, said that it falls on the responsibility of the cabinet, who has been negligent in advising the president when he could proclaim the law. So it is the fault of the government. So any argument being brought forward by the government that the ban on corporal punishment is due to the increase in crime, Madam Speaker, is totally irrelevant. Due to the subjectivity of what corporal punishment is, this motion should be implemented. In your mind, in the government's mind, corporal punishment, maybe to administer a lash on a child's leg or on a child's hand. In another person's mind, corporal punishment may be to drive a child over with a car. Excuse my gruesome expression, but that is the reality that our children face in this society. Due to the lack of representation being brought forward by this government, our children can be abused and given maltreatment. I would also like to point out that Dr. Ralph Welch, a renowned psychologist in Bridgetown, Connecticut, stated that the higher the severity of corporal punishment.
Honorable Member, your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to extend my speaking time to a further 3 minutes in order to give my contribution.
Honorable Members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honorable Member for Princestown be extended for 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no. I think the ayes have it. Member, you may resume.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Due to my time constraint, I'll be very brief. As I was saying, Dr. Ralph Welch, a renowned psychologist in Bridgetown University, Connecticut, states that the higher the severity of corporal punishment, the more likely it is for delinquents to engage in illegal activity. And as I close, Madam Speaker, I would like to point out to the parliamentarians in this August House to please dissuade yourself from party politics and make it your personal vendetta to implement this motion, because it protects our children. Don't make a particular member for Toco, persuade you into negating this motion, because it protects our nation's youth. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member for St. Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and welcome. Welcome to what would be a momentous day in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. For it is this day that we will declare the policies that will eradicate youth delinquency in our country. Madam Speaker, I'm advocating for a more developed system of corporal punishment in conjunction with alternative methods as our policy to reduce delinquency in our youth. I will thoroughly explain why our corporal punishment policy is not abuse. I will demonstrate the negative impact of removing corporal punishment to a nation, and I will show the positive effect of optimizing the corporal punishment system in our country, while my colleagues will further elaborate on the alternative methods. But first, I find it imperative to correct some of the many misconceptions of the opposition. Now, the member for Tabakit defined corporal punishment as any form of physical abuse. She said, however light. And the member for Princestown drew the reference of driving a car over somebody. Now, do you think driving a car over somebody is corporal punishment? It fits their definition, but their definition of corporal punishment also fits maybe shooting a wrongdoer in the arm. But that is not what we're advocating for. That is so clearly abuse. So, I find it seems it is necessary to establish a clear and unequivocal distinction between corporal punishment and abuse, since they are so erroneously claiming that they are synonymous. To reiterate my colleague, corporal physical abuse is the deliberate infliction of serious injury that will cause permanent harm, or actions that place a child in an obvious risk of serious injury or death. Corporal punishment, however, is a method of physical disciplining within limits for the purpose of reforming a wrongdoer or deterring unacceptable behavior. So therefore, we must define the limits of corporal punishment that we will allow. As in, since you claim that there are no laws protecting the children, that is what we will establish here. There's a method in some Canadian schools that has seen tremendous success, whereby any physical chastisement by a teacher must be accompanied by a senior member of staff, typically a deputy head. The teacher and the witness must also sign a book stating the student who is being punished and why. This will prevent any acrimonious actions of teachers or venting of stress and anger on a student, therefore protecting the students while still implementing corporal punishment. Additionally, the instrument being used for physical punishment and the body part that is being hit must be stated. Our policy will prohibit the utilization of any device that can cause immoderate pain to a student and will prevent students from getting serious injuries or permanent damage. which is protection of our children while still maintaining corporal punishment. This is in no way breach of the rights of a child. This will be implemented into our corporal punishment rules. So never in any instance can corporal punishment degenerate into physical abuse. Therefore, our corporal punishment policy will be practiced and administered in such a manner that it will be safe to students, it will be moral, and it will be non-abusive. This policy does not breach the United Nations Conventions of the Rights of a Child, which is a major accusation and the basis of their argument in the motion. Our developed system of corporal punishment does not infringe on the rights of a child, Madam Speaker. But here's an idea that the opposition has failed to consider. What about the rights of our society? Doesn't our society deserve policies that promote low crime rates and a safe environment? It has been clearly shown by several studies that the prohibition of corporal punishment in schools has a subsequent increase in the crime and youth delinquency rate in many countries. According to data provided by the United Nations Statistics Division, the homicide count in Venezuela in 2005 was 9,934. Corporal punishment was outlawed, and the homicide rate escalated tremendously to 13,080 in 2010. Corporal punishment is illegal in Honduras as well. Do you think...
Honorable Member, your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to continue to speak for 3 minutes in order to complete my contribution.
Honorable Members, the question is that the speaking time for the Honorable Member of for St. Joseph be extended for 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no? I think the ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do you think it is just a coincidence that the two countries with the highest homicide rates in the world have corporal punishment outlawed? Even countries such as Costa Rica and Portugal have seen vertiginous rises in crime rates since the abolition of corporal punishment. This fully exemplifies that removing corporal punishment in our classrooms will reflect in our society and lead to the detriment of our society. Empirical evidence alludes that...
Madam Speaker, I rise upon standing order 4410.
Honorable Member, you are advised not to read directly from your speech, just for reference purposes only, unless you're reading it from an extract from a reliable source.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, I was quoting statistics from the United Nations Statistics Division. Now, empirical evidence alludes that the abolition of corporal punishment will be followed by a significant rise in crime. This is not something we could risk in Trinidad and Tobago. We have, conversely, with the implementation of corporal punishment in our system, in conjunction with alternative methods that will be offered by my colleagues, we will experience a restoration in our society of values such as responsibility, respect, accountability, honor for our authority. And all these mannerisms are required to be ubiquitous in society before we can see lower delinquency rate. If our focus here is to lower the delinquency rate, we should implement and employ all correctional methods, including corporal punishment, and not abandon them. Also, many experienced teachers believe that corporal punishment is the most effective method for correcting intransigent students. In summary, I've extensively illustrated that our form of corporal punishment is not abuse, does not violate the United Nations Act. It is axiomatically clear that corporal punishment is necessary in our society, and we need to further optimize corporal punishment system. In closing, the footsteps in the sands of time are not made sitting down. And if we want to make youth delinquency something of the past, we must stand for restorative justice. We must stand for the rights of society, and we must stand for corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Honorable Member for Maloney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Now, the member for St. Joseph said that corporal punishment don't bring physical harm. Now, that's based on what we see. We don't see everything. You're talking just on what you see, the physical body. Also, the member for Point 14 said, bring back the whip. Now, we don't know what goes on inside of the human body with reference to the effects of corporal punishment. So I will tell you, corporal punishment can bring effects to a child. When a child lives in constant fear of corporal punishment, Madam Speaker, they are exposed to a hormone called cortisol. This cortisol hormone causes the child to have poor memory or even stunted growth, Madam Speaker. In fact, at the University of California, Madam Speaker, they did a research and they found out that children or persons who are exposed to chronic stress.
I rise on a point of order. Standing order number 48-1, relevance.
Honorable Member, I do not agree with you. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was saying, the University of California, they did a research and they found out that corporal punishment, persons who are exposed to chronic stress, which is the corporal punishment leading to fear, which leads to stress, they are prone to mental disorders like anxiety or mood disorders. So we have already violated the Article 19 of the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child. We have already done it. 23 years ago, when this article was made, we already violated that act. So we can see today that corporal punishment has transformed into abuse. Now, we may understand what corporal punishment is from abuse. I realize that the government, they also understand there's a difference. But what about the parents and the teachers and the caregivers, Madam Speaker? Everybody has their own perception of what corporal punishment is. I read an article, Madam Speaker, and it said that the mother burnt 3 of her children, and these children were between the ages of 4 and 8 years. She was using it as corporal, she used it as corporal punishment. She used that as a form to discipline the children. Now, that is abuse, but to her, it is corporal punishment. That's what she said. So everybody have this perception of, they have their own perception of what corporal punishment seems to be. Also, the teacher who flushed the student's head in the toilet, he believed that to be corporal punishment.
Would the honourable member give way?
I will not give way. As I continue, how can we accept that we want our children to fear us? We should want our children to be comfortable coming and talk to us and saying they are going through this, they are going through that. If they made a mistake, they should be comfortable to come and talk to us. And even so, how can we want to control delinquency when, apart from the physical self, we are affecting their mental ability to function? That is where the cortisol comes back in. Now, corporal punishment under no circumstance should be used as an alternative method of discipline. It should not be used under no circumstance. And we, the opposition, recognizes that. In closing, Madam Speaker, it is important to foster peaceful, functional relationships between adults and children in order to produce well-rounded, socially accepted, and self-disciplined citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Therefore, we, the opposition, are looking for the policy positions that needs to be put in place so that when the alternative methods are being used, there would be policies that would enforce the parents and the teachers and encourage them to follow these policies and positions. So I just want to say that corporal punishment should not be used to discipline our children of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Labrie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Indiscipline, delinquency, and protecting our children's rights. I'm happy and grateful to speak at this debate because, as our founding father said, the future of our nation lies in the book bags of our children. And Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Education, I will enlighten the other side because they are saying that they are the government in waiting, but delivered no policy or no plan on how to take this country forward. So just imagine they on this side. This will be chaos. No plan or no vision. How are we to move forward? They brought a motion into this house, but offered no alternatives. When you're talking about corporal punishment. So since they offered no alternative, Madam Speaker, that's why I'm here as the Minister of Education. I will enlighten them, I'll teach them today. So one of the first things we did was that we created early childhood centers, 146 we have so far, where we will teach and re-socialize our children, because you know from the first 5 years of their life to the most formative years. So if we train them from then, Madam Speaker, we would be able to reduce our violence and indiscipline in our schools. Another thing that we did, Madam Speaker, was that we implemented the PPP, which was the Peace Promotion Program. And Madam Speaker, if you would allow me, I will quote for you some of the things that was done through this program. Through training in mediation, peer counseling, and conflict resolution, we trained our children in that. So we teach them how to use their words, how to talk, how to communicate. We also did the pre-carnival preparation program. And Madam Speaker, I was privy to one of those programs where the police came into the schools and they spoke to them about alcohol abuse and drug abuse during carnival time and talk about sex, or the sex that goes on during carnival time, about protection and these things, Madam Speaker. We also looked at skill-based or alternative education program, which were targeted at low-achieving students. So some students are not all for the sciences, the hardcore sciences or the business, but we give them an alternative. So they wouldn't be, these children wouldn't have to be frustrated in the classrooms by not understanding what they are doing. We also did through the implementation of student councils in every secondary school. So we gave them a chance of management to work along with the principal. We also looked at the management of the classrooms and alternatives to corporal punishment and stress and anger understanding for teachers. So we train the teachers, we send them on workshops, so they will look at alternatives of how to deal with our children. We also look at parenting, and Madam Speaker, I want to stress on this because this program, it looked and we got so much influence from the non-governmental organizations, which I'm thankful for. To this parenting, we talked with the community leaders, we trained them so they can go back into the community and provide workshops and courses for our parents that they can learn new things, new methods. And finally, through this program we introduced school safety officers, which was to help assist the principals of each school. But that's not all we did, no. Through the Ministry of National Security, and I must thank the Minister of National Security, we reintroduced the cadets back into the school system. That's what we did. That is your government working for you, Madam Speaker. Also, through the Ministry of National Security, we had police patrols. So while you're trying to walk in to and from schools, they're seeing the police. So we had the incident with fights and so on. No, Madam Speaker, we are trying our best. Also, we protect our nation's children in schools. We have spent over $6 million just to pay the MTS workers, the security officers, just to make sure our children are protected in schools. And Madam Speaker, we also looked at sex education because we saw over the last few years we have been seeing an increase in teenage pregnancies in our schools. So through the non-governmental organizations, we are trying to now foster a program.
Member, your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to continue to speak for 3 minutes in order to complete my contribution.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honorable Member Fuller Bray be extended by 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no. I think the ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So we looked at sex education. We're trying to formulate a program of how to educate our children on sex and their bodies and sexuality. But, Madam Speaker, my question to the opposition is, yes, we have done all of these alternatives, but we have also seen that within our schools, there is still violence. So what are we to do? Are we to leave our children and let them go astray? That's what we're supposed to do? Watch them and say we tried everything. So what we will do now? That is why we are for the reintroduction of corporal punishment. And Madam Speaker, before I close, I want to address a point which the honorable leader of the opposition said. She said, are we a Mickey Mouse government? Are we a Mickey Mouse country, sorry? But I want to ask her, does she know that America, who signed and ratified that same convention in 19 states, allow corporal punishment? Are they a Mickey Mouse country? Do your homework, come on. So, Madam Speaker, in closing, I want to ask the opposition to join with us, because we want to bring back our nation to where it used to be. Bring back the old-time days, Madam Speaker, as you see. So, the opposition, work with us as we try to foster a better society. Because together we aspire, together we achieve. I thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks, Honorable Lord.
The Honorable Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am baffled. Our current government is saying bring back the old-time days. The last time I depend on an old-time day, I found myself driving a bike from San Fernando to Port of Spain. I can't believe they are saying they want corporal punishment to be implemented back into schools, Madam Speaker, because they seem to believe that it is the most effective form of discipline, according to the member for Point 14. I agree, Madam Speaker, corporal punishment is effective. It is effective in damaging our nation's youth. It is effective. It is effective in damaging our nation's youth, both physically and emotionally. What an effect! You see, Madam Speaker, what our current government failed to realize is the many negative, detrimental effects of corporal punishment on our nation's youth emotion. And I would like to quote Paul Holliner. He said, human beings are born with feelings, and these feelings are not changed. However, they are combined to form emotions, which are affected by the environment. And according to Joseph Ledoux, a world-renowned psychologist, he said, corporal punishment leads to bitterness and resentment, depression, and internal pain in youth. Let us all be realistic here, Madam Speaker. If someone is being beaten, would they be thinking of cake and ice cream? No, Madam Speaker. How would someone feel when they are being beaten? I would not feel like a pound of gold. Thoughts of, suicidal thoughts, Madam Speaker. I would feel embarrassed. I would feel hurt. I would feel unloved. Is this what the current government wants for our future? I highly doubt. How can we pave a future with doubt and aggressiveness, Madam Speaker? This will take us nowhere. Madam Speaker, it is what we want for our young individuals. Fear. Do we want fear or punishment in a way that would hurt them? I recently saw a video on Facebook where a mother took a shovel and beat her daughter. And having had the opportunity to speak to that mother, she told me, yes, it was corporal punishment. And I asked, how do you know that it was corporal punishment? And she said, because it is just simply beating. How can we think like this? That is a lackadaisical way of thinking, Madam Speaker.
Would the honourable member give way?
No, I will not. So, Madam Speaker, in conclusion, I am appealing to this government. Do we want our future to be emotionally scarred? We do not want to be emotionally scarred, Madam Speaker, because It is very hard to heal emotions, and we as individuals are all made up of emotions. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Tunapuna.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It seems like the lighting in this honourable house is rather poor because all the opposition see from corporal punishment is darkness. So it's up to me. So it's up to me to shine some light here today in this honourable house. Member for Caroni Central, we love our children enough to inflict corporal punishment to see that they are going down the right path. And the Honourable Member of Maloney, speaking about the mother burning her 4 children, clearly, that's not corporal punishment, that's abuse. And she wasn't trying to inflict corporal punishment in any way. It's a barbecue what she was preparing for. Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Trade, Industry, Investment and Communications, this government have tried alternative methods to see that our nation's children are going down the proper way, Madam Speaker. Because children seem to drop out of schools and with trades like NESC, YTEP, and the MUST program, Madam Speaker, we try our very best to get these youths intact for the future. Because our nation needs trade. We need plumbers, woodworkers, electricians, because these are dying trades in our nation, Madam Speaker, and only the youths of tomorrow can accomplish these things for us, because we are getting old. Eventually, I'll be after hiring a youth to come into my place and do my plumbing work. But if it's a criminal, would he do my plumbing work? He will take my material and do his own plumbing work in his own place, Madam Speaker. This government do not want. Madam Speaker, it's the oppositions that are afraid that if we introduce corporal punishment in our schools, that the youths of tomorrow will do a better job than they do in the future to come. Madam Speaker, the opposition leader, the Honourable Opposition Leader, Member for Tabakik, stated in the motion, and whereas it is the responsibility of the government to establish the appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational structures to protect our nation's children from persons who would do them harm. And our nation's children also persons. Cannot they do themselves their own harm? This is what we are trying to prevent, Madam Speaker. We don't want them to harm themselves in any way. Because children these days, I can't explain it. It's inexplainable. Madam Speaker, at this very point in time, our nation's youth are going astray. And I see at the Youth Training Center, we are having trade at the Youth Training Center also, Madam Speaker, and with this, it cannot work alone. They also inflict corporal punishment at the Youth Training Center, which helps these youths to live a better life in the future, Madam Speaker. It is working. I've been doing research there. It's a lovely experience because even the greatest footballers and our nation's greatest rugby players comes from the Youth Training Center. They learn, Madam Speaker, because they cannot learn from only words, they learn from corporal punishment also. We need corporal punishment, Madam Speaker. I thank you.
The Honourable Member for Diego Martin West.
I thank you, Madam Speaker. I hear terms such as bring back and reintroduce. I am not persuaded by this government. I am convinced that this government is pretending to be a
like a blind, crooked man on the street trying to beg me my money, to take my money, but I will not give them my money. For I know the truth. And the truth is, I know that Mr. PP, the belt they does have, those teachers in the school still lies in the desk. The whips that they pull out still lies in the desk. And according to your government, the teachers...
Would the member give way?
No, I will not give way at this moment. I know that the teachers in the system, just like this government, will want to bring out discipline with love. Discipline with love. And call beating children discipline. But you see, all this talk about bring back and reinvent, it never came out of the system. It just was hidden.
Point of order. Madam Speaker, I rise on a point of order. Standing order 8-1.
Honorable member, you are advised that in the chamber we speak the English language. Thank you. In continuing, I have a story to tell. My brother is now 15 years old. At age 6, he was afraid to go to school. Afraid to go to school, Madam Speaker. Why? Because the teacher administers corporal punishment. Is that really what we want in our system? I've been looking and listening to the Minister of Education. You have been putting a lot of time, effort, and energy into the early childhood setting and creating teachers and developing teachers that know alternative methods and how to deliver them. You are right to say that we need to set a foundation. But when we set a foundation in the early childhood setting and they walk into primary schools and they meet with love, and then they go to the high school and they realize that after they learn this violent trade, that I can do it as well. Why? Why are we not following through? We are setting the foundation, not having corporal punishment in the early childhood settings, and then in primary school, the children are introduced to Mr. Love. Why can't we set the foundation and build the house and go throughout? What is the message being sent? Neglecting our students and beating them. Well, I want to know, as a teacher, you say I will beat you in the classroom, I will send you home and let your mother beat you at home, and then when you get older and you do wrong, they will beat you in the streets. And when you reach to the prison, you want to know why these prisoners feeling like they're beat out and they come back into the system. In closing, we the opposition are not trying to threaten nor scare you into understanding the importance of removing corporal punishment from our school systems. But we are trying to appeal to your effective domain. Please, if you would not like it for you, if you would not like it for your children, for your grandchildren, please desist and consider what I would not like for myself. Why would I impose it on others? I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Port of Spain North. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
to address the points made by the member for Diego Martin West. If a child believes that it is okay to hit because he or she sees a teacher or an adult administering corporal punishment, then that child fails to realize the purpose and meaning behind such an action. Besides, a good and effective teacher will only use corporal punishment after all of the alternatives have failed. There will always be those that abuse the system, but that does not mean that the system does not work. The Children's Act of 2012 amendments made to Section 22, and I read, "Every person in Trinidad and Tobago who is a parent of a child or acts in loco parentis has responsibilities under the law in respect to the parenting function, including but not limited to the responsibility to guide and direct the child without the use of cruel, inhuman, or humiliating punishment."
Will the Speaker give way?
No, thank you. Corporal punishment, as defined by our opening speaker, in no way breaches this amendment. Instead, it outlines the best method for teaching our children the fundamental difference that exists between what is right and what is wrong. Are we not considering the teachers? Those are the persons on the front lines dealing with the delinquent youth. With corporal punishment off the agenda, there exists zero effective sanctions for teachers to deal with the most stubborn of terrors. Members of the opposition will continue to reiterate the point of the blurred line that exists between corporal punishment and abuse in a petty attempt at winning an impossible battle. But I say to you today, let us remember the sacred watchwords of Trinidad and Tobago: discipline, tolerance, and production. It seems to me as though they are advocating for an indisciplined and lethargic society. No. My predecessors highlighted the link between a lack of corporal punishment in the home and the development of juvenile youth. In 2009 to 2010, the then Minister of National Security attested to an escalation in youth crime. Police figures show that persons under the age of 18 committed 933 serious crimes. He blamed youth crime on a growth in criminal gangs, high availability of firearms, juvenile delinquency in the school system, and the drug trade. It is with utmost certainty that I say to you, in homes and schools where corporal punishment is utilized, there is a lower chance of individuals becoming juvenile delinquents. But before,
Speaker give way.
No, thank you. But before members of the opposition begin to make an attempt stating that abusive homes are the breeding ground for juvenile delinquents, please allow me to reiterate the point that seems to be falling on deaf ears here today. Corporal punishment is not abuse. Statistics taken from the Ministry of Justice Youth Delinquency Survey in 2013 indicated that as of February 1st, 2018, there were 169 juvenile delinquents being held at the various institutions across Trinidad and Tobago. The average age of these delinquents, 16 years old. It is clear that the issue of juvenile delinquency is running rampant here in Trinidad and Tobago, and those who get involved with the delinquents after the act has been committed is less likely to be effective because at that point the antisocial habits have already been ingrained into the individual. A more effective method is one which intervenes before the onset of delinquent behavior. But what of the economy? It is the government of Trinidad and Tobago that has to fund the aforementioned institutions. It is the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who pay $315 TT per prisoner per day because, let's face it, the alternative methods will fail, and when they become adults, they will find themselves in adult prisons. It is the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who must dip into their pocket and fund thousands of employees to manage and parole these deviants. Honorable members, do not let the propaganda spewed by the opposition cloud your judgment. I say to you, what sounds better, a lash today or a jail cell tomorrow? Thank you. The Honorable Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the words of Martin Luther King Jr., violence begets violence. We know that young minds are impressionable. We know that our children inculcate behaviors during early socialization. This was corroborated by the Minister of Education as well as the member of Port of Spain North. South. School is of chief importance as it influences a child's actions to a great extent. Therefore, corporal punishment in schools unleashes a series of unwelcome consequences that will afflict a child for the duration of their lives. In 2010, child psychologists Silver, Dublin, and Lowry from the Rutgers Medical School proclaimed, and I quote, "A child who experiences forms of violence has the strong potential to become a violent member of society."
Point of order. Standing Order 55-1B.
Honorable Member, I do not agree with you. Member, you may continue.
I will continue. Weaver and Whitman of the American Medical Association corroborated this statement in 2012 with a study that proved that 74% of children who endured violence in childhood grew on to commit criminal acts in adulthood. Madam Speaker, this figure is staggering. The key point of the issue remains that corporal punishment unleashes a cycle of crime and violence. In this regard, it fails to protect those children who need the most protection.
The Honourable Member give way, please.
Yes, I will give way.
Within the parameters of our definition of corporal punishment, we establish that it is not considered violence in our policy. So the basis of your argument is invalid.
But my opposition leader has outlined the definition of corporal punishment, which has stated that it was violence. I will continue. It fails to protect those who require the most protection: our impoverished youth, our socially disenfranchised youth, our marginalized youth, youth born into areas stricken with violence, youth born into abusive homes. Corporal punishment fails them. It is an ineffective measure of dealing with delinquency and indiscipline. It does not free them from their distressing circumstances. But listen to what corporal punishment does to these vulnerable children. It exacerbates criminal tendencies, and it aggravates the inclination towards violent acts. Corporal punishment is an impetus that engenders further delinquency in our society. Our children will be
Would the member give way?
Yes.
Member, I just want some clarity. Where did you get the thing that you just said about it exacerbates and all these things? Can you quote where you found it? Who said so?
This was gathered from my study. The 2010 child psychologists, Silver, Dublin, and Lowry, who proclaimed that a child who experienced forms of violence has the potential to become a violent member. It was included in that article. Corporal punishment is an impetus that engenders further delinquency in our society. Our children will be imprisoned forever in an unbreakable cycle of crime and violence. Madam Speaker, for the benefit of the government, I will speak in layman's terms. Corporal punishment does not offer protection. Corporal punishment is a grave injustice. Corporal punishment is merely legalized violence. It violates Article 19. It violates the basic rights of a child, and it violates the duty of the government to protect its children. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In response to the member for Diego Martin West, you told us a story about your brother, how he was afraid to go to school and his teachers beat him. Now tell me, Is it not that your brother was mischievous and deserved correction?
I rise on a point of order, standing order number 48-6.
Honorable member, I do not believe that he was imputing improper motive. You may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Additionally, in response to the member for Maloney, cortisol, let me correct you. Cortisol is a hormone that is produced upon high stress levels. Upon preparation for your debate today, did you not experience some sort of stress? Do you not experience stress on a daily basis? Corporal punishment is not the only cause for stress. Anyway, on with my contribution. In 1991, Trinidad and Tobago signed the Charter on the Rights of a Child. In 2001, there was the informal abolishment of corporal punishment in schools by then Education Minister, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar. We boasted a low crime rate and a low murder toll. Upon the election of the opposition into government in mid-2001, there seemed to be a rapid increase in crime in our society. Is this not a clear indication that the opposition mismanaged our policy? Crime is so rampant in Trinidad and Tobago that we see murder tolls reaching as high as 550, which was observed in 2008. The Express in 2005 put forward statistics that said that 50% of all youth whom are defined as persons under 18 were involved in some law-breaking action. A further study suggested that 67% of all the youth law-breaking were described as out of control. There seemed to be a 63% increase in crime rate since the informal abolishment of corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago...
May the Speaker give way?
Yeah, sure.
I heard you mention there seem. Do you have any facts to that?
This statistic was also put forward by the Express in the same study done in 2005. Anyway, Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago once boasted low crime rate, low youth delinquency. Now, what do we see? We see pornography. We see videos of fights emerging from our schools. Assassinations, Your Honorable Speaker. We recently saw the assassination of Independent Senator and State Prosecutor Dana Sita-Hall. Now tell me, somebody please explain to me where this is taking our society. What should we expect next? Who should we expect next to be assassinated? Madam Speaker, our intention is to reduce the rampant crime in Trinidad and Tobago. How do we intend to do this? By reinstituting...
Will the Speaker give way?
Sure.
Are you saying that the lack of corporal punishment is the only contributing factor to the high rise in crime?
If the honorable member for Maloney would give me a chance to finish my speech, she would understand where I'm coming from. So we intend to reduce the rampant crime in Trinidad and Tobago by reinstituting corporal punishment in schools. Our youth are our future. By correcting our youth...
Standing order 4410, the member is reading from his speech.
Honorable member, I do not agree with you. He is reading with reference. Member, you may continue.
Thank you. By correcting our youth, we will ensure a brighter future and a safer tomorrow. The reinstitution of corporal punishment in our schools is not...
Honorable member, could you please take your seat? Your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to continue to speak for 3 minutes in order to complete my contribution.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honorable member for Couva North be extended by 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no? I think the ayes have it. Member, you may resume.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The reinstitution of corporal punishment into our schools is not a green light for parents and teachers to spank children. It is, however, a red light for those who want to see the abolishment of corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, our intention is not to induce corporal punishment on our students upon every mistake that they make. They are only human, and therefore we expect them to make mistakes. Madam Speaker, we intend to implement alternatives first and then implement corporal punishment for those individuals who have failed to be corrected by these alternatives. Madam Speaker, as Minister of Sport, the Ministry intends to implement alternatives such as physical training to be conducted by qualified physical training officers. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Sport intends to further the use of the Hoop for Life program and others just like it. As sport, Madam Speaker, is an effective way of reducing aggression and bad intentions in our youth. I thank you.
The honorable member for Mayaro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is very obvious to me that the other side is very confused. And let me enlighten the member for Couva North. He's talking about the rising crime rates and assassinations and things like that. But it is because of corporal punishment that contributes to that behavior.
Would the member give way?
No, I will not. Let me clear up something for all members. The opposition is not saying that corporal punishment is abuse. What we are saying is that because of corporal punishment, it evolves into abuse. Madam Speaker, I'm saying here today that corporal punishment is the root cause for violence within our society and the rise in delinquency. There's obviously a problem because we are building jails and closing down libraries. Let me quote a definition from UNICEF, and for those who do not know the organization UNICEF, they are the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, and they are the world's leading advocate for children. Corporal punishment, as defined by UNICEF, states, is the use of physical force causing pain, but not wounds, as a means of discipline. Also, Dr. Maury Stratus from the University of New Hampshire stated that corporal punishment is the use of physical force with the intention of causing a child to experience pain, but not injury. Madam Speaker, I did not know there's a proper way of inflicting pain on a child. Violence involves physical force. So what the government is trying to tell me is that they are performing an act of violence by enforcing corporal punishment. Corporal punishment tells the children nothing of how they should behave. All corporal punishment is doing is teaching them a lesson on bad behavior. When we hit a child, Madam Speaker, all we are telling them that it is wrong to do something, but they don't understand what they are doing is wrong. They don't understand behind it that the concept of what they are doing is wrong. Madam Speaker, corporal punishment is a means of discipline and relies on fear, submissiveness, and diminishes a child's capacity to grow up as an autonomous individual.
we are saying that corporal punishment contributes to a climate of violence and delinquency. As I quote from Maurice Stratus again, he says, corporal punishment provides resentment and anger in many children, which further increases in the probability of violence. Corporal punishment also by the U.S. Advisory Board on Child Abuse says, corporal punishment implies that society approves of physical violation of children, and it establishes an unhealthy norm, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, all the opposition is trying to say is that good school discipline should be instilled through the mind and not the behind. But you see, the government is very confused, as I said. Discipline and punishment are two different things. Discipline and punishment is not the same thing. Real discipline is not based on force. It is based on grounds of mutual understanding and respect for one another. I am sure we are all familiar here with the old adage, monkey see, monkey do. But let me clear up something one time, because I'm sure somebody from the other side will say, I call in the children of the nation monkeys. So let me clear it up one time. Let me look at a theoretical underpinning by Albert Bandura. He says that in the social learning theory, states of behavior is learned from the environment through process of observational learning. In society, children are surrounded by influential models such as parents within the family, teachers at school. These models provide examples of behavior to observe and imitate. So what happens when the child see the teacher beating someone in the school and they go outside, and we have seen it before, they go and they play teacher too and they're beating somebody. But how do they know how hard to hit somebody?
Honorable Member for Mayaro, your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to continue to speak for 3 minutes in order to complete my contribution.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the Honorable Member for Mayaro be extended for 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no? No. I think the ayes have it. Member, you may resume.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me continue by saying I'm sure that the other side will also say they were hit as a child, and they turned out okay. But how do they really know that being hit as a child did not harm them? Because probably if they weren't hit as a child, they would have still turned out okay. If we want to address the high levels of violence in society, we need to stop teaching children that hitting our next person is the correct way for dealing with things that they think the other person is doing wrong. As one of my colleagues pointed out, violence begets violence. There's a strong association between corporal punishment and child aggression, and it carries out into adulthood. And we see it. Elizabeth Gershoff said, parental corporal punishment is associated with the following, and I quote, increased child aggression, increased child delinquency and antisocial behavior, increased adult aggression, and increased adult criminality. No, I will not. Madam Speaker, and we see it also, I think it was the member for point 14 stated out, where the parent was beating a child with the shovel, and yes, we know it as using a shovel to mix cement and for picking up dog mess. But what I am saying is that because she was probably subjected to corporal punishment in the past, the act has escalated into the abusive behavior. Because the parents now...
Will the Honourable Member be willing to give way?
No, I will not. What the parent is thinking now is that by the small lash or the small pinch not working anymore, so let them escalate the hitting procedure. Madam Speaker, whichever justification we give for corporal punishment, the effects are the same. Corporal punishment harms everyone. As I close, I say, let us think about it. It is a crime to hit our spouse or an employee or a military trainee. So I am asking the other side here today, is it not a crime to hit our children? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am not here to woo you with ostentatious vernacular because we all here are well-educated individuals. Well, the majority of us at least. But my task here today is to show the results in which the government knows it's best to deal with juvenile delinquency and its contribution to crime. I assume that the members and the opposition may not or did not pay keen attention to the Trinidad and Tobago crime webpage, which clearly illustrates that in 2000, the crime level was at 151, whereas in 2008, the crime rate drastically increased to 550. The explanation for this is that in 2000, we were informed of the abolition of corporal punishment. The government on this side only cares about the country's interests. So because of the drastic level of crime rate, this government sees Trinidad's openness, vulnerability, and the small size could not have escaped the effects of this disturbing phenomenon. After 2008, crime drastically decreased, simply because the government implemented alternative methods to deal with juvenile delinquency. These alternative methods are the Peace Promotion Program. This program's goal is to create peace in an individual, a child, the school, home, community, and the society at large. According to the then Minister of Education, and I quote, it's aimed to build up a defense mechanism and resilience against any tendency or inducement to violence and indiscipline. This program trains teachers with dealing with classroom management, also dealing with stress and anger understanding and management. A joint act plan was introduced by the then Minister of National Security, who introduced school safety officers. Other alternative methods includes guidance counselors, deans, homework centers, also parenting education, skill-based education programs, and alternative education. Since I am the minister, well, the acting minister of tertiary and skill education, under this ministry, we introduce public avenues such as CCC program, the MUS program, HYPE, NESC, MIC. As we all know, these are skilled programs which was introduced to alleviate juvenile delinquency. These programs proved to be quite fruitful, since today we have our youths opening their own business, we have our youth working under great companies. Also in OJT, which is at the forefront of this ministry, we have seen that it has employed a few number of our youths. Am I voicing an opinion? No, this was stated, not alleged, not questioned, but stated with facts and figures. It is seen that crime is rising drastically because of juvenile delinquency. But if discipline was infuted and instilled in the first place, today we would not have delinquents. Because students don't have proper role models, because they are affected by peer pressure and the media, these problems cannot be fixed with corporal punishment. That's why alternative methods is the first resort in this instance. Be reminded that I said these particular issues corporal punishment cannot deal with. But once criminal activities are done in all schools and alternative methods can fix it, corporal punishment will be used. The question that may be stirring in your minds today is, what do I consider as criminal activities? And I quote from the Oxford Dictionary. This is an act committed, unlawful activities, a serious offense, an action that is deemed injurious. The opposition thinks that corporal punishment is barbaric, but the government is here to say that alternative methods will be used firstly, and then lastly, corporal punishment will be used if alternative methods does not work. I would conclude by saying we are losing our nation's youths to the plague of violence, Madam Speaker. We are losing our teachers to indisciplined students. Ask yourself, how many more newspaper articles do you want to read where it has youth violence, where it has school violence? So once the policy position in relation to alternative methods is effectively used, then the use for corporal punishment would not be mandatory. Put a stop to violence. You can make... No, I would not give way. Put a stop to violence. you can make a difference. Support our policy in place to make Trinidad and Tobago the sweet Trinidad and Tobago we know it could be. The question was proposed by the leader of the opposition. What is reasonable punishment? As I stated, this is alternative methods, and as the government clearly supports this, once alternative methods does not work, we will use.
Could you please take your seat? Your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to continue to speak for 3 minutes in order to continue my contribution.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time for the honorable member of Caroni East be extended for 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no? No. I think the ayes have it. Member, you may continue.
As I was saying, the question was proposed by the leader of the opposition. What is reasonable punishment? This is alternative methods, and as the government clearly supports this, once alternative methods does not work, we will use corporal punishment as the last resort. Also, as the member of the opposition, Representative from Maloney, she said we should talk to our children and our students, etc. But in our alternative methods, we talk. Guidance counselors talk. Deans talk. How much talking do you all want? When we speak, they don't listen. Perhaps if the member for Caroni Central and Diego Martin West had gotten some good whipping, then they would not stand here and oppose the sole function that is known to work. Thank you, ladies
On the point
and
of
gentlemen.
order, standing order number 48-6.
Honorable member, I disagree with you. The honorable member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, in order to fully understand why this side yearns for this motion to be passed, one must take into consideration the physiological implications that corporal punishment has on the youth of Trinidad and Tobago. Now recall, according to Article 19 of the Rights of a Child, it is their responsibility to ensure that all children are protected from any form of physical or mental maltreatment while in the care of parents or guardians, and to a further extent, any person with whom the care of the child is entrusted. This includes teachers when the child is at school. So when we are constantly bombarded about reports of corporal punishment gone horribly wrong at home and in the school, we must realize, Madam Speaker, that this government has failed to protect all of this nation's youth. The member of Tunapuna, the member for Tunapuna, asked if we only see the darkness in corporal punishment. I tell you today, I see the darkness. I see the bruises that are left on their skins because of corporal punishment.
Would the honourable member give
Even though I can guarantee you that the members of the other side will call this abuse, let it be known that these acts were committed under the name corporal punishment.
Would the honourable member give way?
No, I will not give way. One can only begin to fathom the physical, the mental, and the emotional scars that these children must bear for the rest of their lives, because as we all know, we cannot unhit a child. But I tell you today, Madam Speaker, let us not allow these malicious acts of violence to plague our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago under this false banner of corporal punishment. Instead, let us reallocate our resources into properly developing and properly implementing the alternative strategies that have been suggested today that will curb delinquency, will foster discipline, and will safeguard our country's most important asset, its youth. After all, is this not what both the government and the opposition want for this nation's youth? But I tell you today, we cannot achieve this if we keep looking back at the past and corporal punishment. How else are we supposed to evolve from the status of a developing country to that of a developed one if we do not seek to implement methods that have been proven to work in developed
Will
countries.
the honourable member be willing to give way?
Not at this moment. This, Madam Speaker, honourable members, reallocating our resources into properly developing and properly implementing these alternatives, this is the way forward for Trinidad and Tobago. Because I tell you today, of the over 600 educational facilities that we have in this school, I can guarantee you that not every single one of these have properly implemented alternative strategies, and some of them do resort to corporal punishment.
Would the member give way?
Not at this moment. So I beseech you today, take this step forward towards protecting and nurturing the future of Trinidad and Tobago. Take a step towards ensuring that the future leaders of Trinidad and Tobago are raised with the ability to surpass this current generation and are not hindered by scars of violence. Take a step towards curbing youth delinquency and crime in the long run, not in the short run. Take a step today towards removing the seeds of violence from our nation's blossoming youth. Support this motion today and take a step towards a brighter future for Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
The Honourable Member for Talparo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and a pleasant morning to everyone. Before I begin, I would like to highlight a couple of things that the opposition seems to not be able to get into their heads. One, yes, there is a proper way for inflicting pain as defined by corporal punishment itself. Also, my colleague from Mayaro stated that we should seek to educate the child as to what is wrong and what is right from the mind and not the behind. I once agreed with your type of thinking, my friend, but on further research, I realized that the child in these formative years is not consciously aware to the extent where he will understand for himself what is right and what is wrong. Let it be reiterated that this government, in order to curb juvenile delinquency, is in the process of bringing to the floor our policies to be implemented so that this goal will be most effectively achieved. Allow me to stress on most effectively. And let it also be stated that this government does not believe in corporal punishment as the only way. We believe in it as being the most effective way, a last resort, so to speak, for those who are more stubborn than the others. Before I continue, let me tell you about the alternatives which I propose. One, let me start by saying, as a result of this amazing experience at Parliament, I was afforded the opportunity to meet someone who is presently at the Youth Training Center. And on conversing with him about his institution, I was drawn to the fact that he said this: if you behave badly in YTC, you will be punished. However, if you behave well, you will be rewarded. He specifically used the word privileges. You will be given privileges. And this is a type of reward management tactic that has a tendency to induce the best in an individual. And I believe that a similar tactic should be introduced and properly implemented into our schools to induce in our youth their best, and so that they will be motivated to self-actualize. Secondly, with respect to corporal punishment itself, I believe that only the principal and perhaps some deans should be able to administer corporal punishment. Why do I say this? I say this because they are more experienced than the others. And additionally, I propose that in the quest to become a dean or a principal, somebody who is able to administer corporal punishment, This individual must first complete advanced courses on psychology and what I can refer to only as student disciplinary courses, so that they will be educated as to how to go about doing this. But whatever the avenue one may take, one may choose to discipline, it can be agreed that it is essential.
Point of order. Standing order 44-1. 44-10, my bad.
Honorable member, you are advised not to read directly from your scripts or speech, only for references purposes.
Before I continue, Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to continue to speak for 3 minutes in order to complete my contribution.
Honorable members, the question is that the speaking time of the honorable member for Talparo be extended for 3 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against say no.
No.
Clerk, I now call a division.
Ms. Chong? Yes. Ms. Blackwell?
Yes.
Mr. Hunt?
Yes.
Ms. Jaggernaut?
Yes.
Ms. Hazrana? Mr. Hazrana?
Yes.
Ms. Shah?
Yes.
Ms. Diosing?
Yes.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Mr. Shah?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Yes.
Ms. Caldero?
Yes.
Ms. Paris?
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Ms. Redman?
Absent.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Mahabir?
Yes.
Ms. Ramada?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Serju?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Lachman?
Yes.
Ms. Lynch?
Yes.
Mr. Andrew? Ms. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Bolangs McSween?
Yes.
Ms. Ford? Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Ms. Danielle?
Yes.
Ms. Ramdeen?
Yes.
Mr. Kanai?
No.
Ms. Garcia?
Yes.
Ms. Furman?
No.
Ms. Carr?
Yes.
Ms. Tamwing?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. C. Prasad?
Yes.
Ms. Maharaj?
Yes.
Miss Nichols?
Yes.
Ms. King Messiah?
No.
Mr. Richardson?
No.
Ms. Cabrera?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Phillip?
No.
Mr. Jagannauth?
No.
Miss Parkinson?
Yes.
Miss Ali? Miss Simon?
No.
The division is as follows.
Honorable members, the result of the division is 37 members voted for, 7 members voted against, and 3 members abstained. Member, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hope there is still some remnants of what was said in your minds after that period of time. Anyway, so whatever avenue you may choose to discipline the youth, discipline in itself is essential, as the qualities obtained through discipline transcends from an individual's school life into their work life. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I will enlighten you as to what really happens here. If individuals in the workplace lack qualities such as respect and discipline, it would ultimately lead to a decrease in productivity and less economic activity. Therefore, there is a lower potential for a higher GDP and poor economic growth. Conversely, Madam Speaker, the opposite is true. Respect and discipline and these other qualities is equal to higher GDP and better economic development of the country. So let me ask you, as a business owner, as a boss, would you hire someone who lacks discipline and respect? No, we would not. And think for a second, if that guy that lacked discipline and respect was your own son, would you not want to get that part out of him in the early stages? Let me close by saying this. We seem to pride ourselves on the idea that we are one of the more developed Caribbean nations. But remember this, we still have a long way to go. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the fellow member for St. Joseph spoke about a procedure in which the teacher and the child being punished will put to paper the instruments and the body part being used for this act of corporal punishment. However, Madam Speaker, this system, or even the thought of this system, is flawed, as how does one measure and calculate the level of how hard the child is to be beaten, as each child is different? Madam Speaker, the government should seek to find alternative measures to correct a child which does not involve the use of corporal punishment. Madam Speaker, in an article published in the newspaper, the former Minister of National Security, Mr. Sandy, quoted statistics for the period of 2009 to 2010 from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, which he stated, and I quote, that persons under the age of 18 committed a total of 933 serious crimes. Madam Speaker, 933 serious crimes. Madam Speaker, this shows that there's a rise in delinquency and violent acts, mainly due to the removal of corporal punishments in schools, since Trinidad and Tobago agreed to the terms and conditions on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1991, which makes an act of corporal punishment an act of violence. So therefore, Madam Speaker, I'm asking the government, in the absence of corporal punishment, what are you all going to put in place to curb these violent and delinquent acts? We see in the headlines, Madam Speaker, read in our newspapers and hear on the radio very constantly and often about these violent acts happening in the schools. Schoolboy stabs boy, schoolboy stabs girl. No, I will not. Does this sound made up, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the question therefore has to be asked. What new policies and procedures, and I would like to place emphasis on new policies and procedures, would the government be implementing to curb these violent and delinquent acts in school, since corporal punishment cannot be used? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member for Barataria Samon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It has become evident that the members in opposition have not been in government for more than 20 years to ban corporal punishment, nor to have implemented other alternatives. But don't worry, we are here to fix this for our nation. Madam Speaker, corporal punishment is our armor, our antagonist, our nurturer, our nemesis. It's a bitter pill, but one that we must swallow as we acknowledge that there are absolutely no absolutes. There are different strokes for different folks. And though we have seen the failure of different alternatives as corroborated by Dr. the Honorable Tim Gopi Singh, I will further enlighten you. And I quote, the Honorable Dr. Tim Gopi Singh noted that between the period of 2004 and 2010, there were 11,000 suspensions. And in 2013, within a mere 7-day period, 700 students were suspended. I am asking you, is this right? I'm, of course, not advocating for corporal punishment as our first option, but as our last resort. The Ryan report further states that 91.2% of students in hotspots and 90.2% of students felt that they were unsafe in the school environment. Is this right? Dearsaran 2006 noted that juvenile delinquency manifested itself in many forms, whereby 20% used force to get something, 49% struck or threatened another student, 22% engaged in fights without weapons, and 6% did use weapons. Is this right? Our tropic paradise is being compromised. Our tourism-based economy is at risk. The rising crime rate has contributed to the migration of 70% of our tertiary level students and the loss of 16.8% of our GDP.
The Honourable Speaker give way.
Not at the moment. Imagine yourself as a tourist looking towards our tropic paradise, but you are bombarded by a myriad of articles highlighting the abuse of our children, not corporal punishment, I mean, but they have been abused, with articles such as highlighting the case of Kayana Cumberbatch, Jabari Hernandez, and Akil Chambers, and the list goes on and on and on. Thus, the rising crime rate has contributed to a decline in our tourism by 7.3% between 2012 and 2013. I must ask, is our society a pendulum? Do we have no middle ground? Are we simply focusing on the rights of our children and not the rights of other stakeholders in our society? Furthermore, would you rather have your child spanked as necessary, or would you rather visit your child in jail in years to come? Of course, we have alternatives as we aim to restore our tropic utopia. Of course, we must advocate for teacher protection since, as noted in 2014, at Jordan Hill Presbyterian School, a 12-year-old student slapped a teacher. Is this right? The students taunt the teachers and say, government say you can't do me anything. Should we allow our teachers to go into school unequipped to deal with this and simply accept the abuse? Our students are also at risk. Imagine yourself as a parent. How do you feel to know that you are unsure if your child will return home safe? How do you feel to see your child come home with tears streaming down their face? How do you feel having to get a call from the school that your child has been stabbed and their life is at risk? Is this right? No, it is not. We are, however, advocating for the use of corporal punishment with alternative measures as a deterrent. However, the fear of crime is furthermore detrimental to our economy, as our TTCI ranking dropped from 79th in 2011 to 83rd in 2013. Thus, foreigners are dissuaded from migrating, from
May the
simply
Honourable Speaker give way?
in a moment. Making vacations or even simply investing in our economy. We are suffering. Can we allow this? No, we cannot. As the famous sociological theorist said, the school is a microcosm of our society. What happens in the school is a reflection of our future society. And I quote, in 2000, prior to the ban of corporal punishment in 2001, there were 118 murders, which steadily rose to 407 in 2013. Moreover, prior to 2001...
Honourable Member, your speaking time has expired.
Madam Speaker, I seek the agreement of the House to continue to speak for 3 minutes in order to complete my contribution.
Honourable members, the question is that